Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to follow up on one of the questions that Senator Hawley raised with you. Now, you said that you were referring in those discussions about a living constitution to Justice Brennan's interpretive style. Is that correct?
That is what I believe the quote he was referring to was referring to.
And is this the quote in which you said while you were discussing, I think this was in a panel discussion just a couple of months ago that Senator Hawley was asking about, in which you said, if you're one of those people who think that we were at our best when our country was first founded and didn't include women or people of color or people without property in the electoral process, this is probably not the conversation for you. So I'd like to know first, what conversation is that? I want to understand the context here. What do you mean? What conversation isn't for you? Are you characterizing people who believe in originalism as believing that we were at our best as a country when we didn't include women or people of color?
Senator Lee, as I indicated to Senator Grassley, I do speak a lot, but if I remember that conversation correctly, I was getting a lot of hostile and inappropriate comments in the chat, and it was causing a disruption to the organizers and the planners who seemed to think that I would be engaging in some conversation with them. And so I was trying to set expectations for what the conversation would be like.
I understand that. It's good to know, but I'd still like to know what you were referring to.
I was trying, if again that was the conversation that I recall, and I believe that it was me attempting to de-escalate some people who believed that that conversation was a source of or was a potential for a back and forth over chat, which I was not going to let it devolve into.
Okay. Do you believe that's a fair characterization of originalists?
I do not believe that that is a fair characterization of originalist, and I, again, if this is the right conversation that I'm recalling, was trying to de-escalate folks who were disrupting a conversation via chat.
Now, in response to Senator Hawley's questions a moment ago, you said you were when referring to the living Constitution, you were referring to Justice Brennan's approach to interpreting the Constitution, and then you said that that would not necessarily be your approach. Did I understand your response to his question correctly?
Senator, I am not a judge. I don't have a judicial philosophy yet, but my approach would be to first look at the text, then look at precedent, look at the canons of construction, and keep myself limited to what the parties in the matter presented before me.
Okay. Insofar as you were characterizing Justice Brennan's approach to constitutional interpretation, how would you characterize that approach today? What is his approach? What was his approach?
Again, I've never spoken to Justice Brennan. I didn't have the pleasure of meeting him.
But you said a moment ago you were trying to characterize his approach.
He has had quotes about the Constitution not being static, as has Justice John Marshall in McCulloch versus Maryland. What I believe is true, and I believe it's a truism, is that our Constitution is enduring, that it has great values that are universal and timeless, and that those values make our country stronger. Values like freedom of religion, values like liberty, values like equal justice under the law.
Okay. So if you were confirmed, are you saying you would not adopt a living constitutional approach?
Senator, if I'm confirmed, the first place I would look when evaluating a constitution or a statute would be at its text. That is the most probative offering of what a piece of writing means. If required, I would look to precedent from both the Supreme Court and the Second Circuit. If that still didn't answer the question, I would look to the canons of construction, the structure.
I understand. Now, back in 2014, you described new voter integrity laws, including, as I understand it, voter ID laws, as representing, quote, the biggest voting rights rollback since the Jim Crow era. Now, personally, I think it's an insult to the brave Americans who engaged in the civil rights movement to draw any comparison between the heinous race-motivated requirements imposed by the Democratic Party under the Ku Klux Klan's influence, to compare those to today's common-sense, race-neutral, and often bipartisan election security measures, which, according to some polls, are supported by a majority of African-American voters. Do you stand by that statement today that voter ID laws are the biggest voting rights rollback since the Jim Crow era?
Senator, I understand and very much believe in the importance of election integrity. Elections are how we resolve our political differences peacefully. The Supreme Court has spoken and provided standards for assessing voter ID in the Crawford case. If I am lucky enough to be confirmed, I would be duty-bound to apply that precedent to any case in controversy that came before me, and I would do so without hesitation or reservation.
I understand that, but I am asking about a statement that you, in fact, made. Do you stand by your statement that it's the biggest voting rights rollback since the Jim Crow era?
Senator, if that is the statement that I recall, it was occurring alongside a great number of pieces of legislation across the country that, as an empirical matter, looked different than what we had seen since earlier times, and that was what the reference was to.
So you were not referring to voter ID laws?
Again, if I remember correctly, it was a wide array of laws that would have included voter ID laws, because around the time period that you're talking about, we saw a number of them introduced. But again, the Supreme Court has said that within certain confines, the voter ID laws are acceptable. The Fifth Circuit en banc also said that there are times when voter ID laws cross the line. If I am a judge, I would be required to look at all of the relevant precedent and examine any law that was before me to figure out if unlawful discrimination was present.
I see my time's expired. I do find it concerning that the witness still hasn't distanced herself. I understand sometimes people say things and later regret them, but she still hasn't distanced herself from statements made to that effect a few years ago, and I think that's significant. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Pérez,